We are tracking chilling new developments in a case that is sending shockwaves through Florida. A teen boy accused of a brutal assault and murder on his own stepsister. Her name, Anna Kepner. All of this allegedly happening during a family vacation aboard a Carnival cruise ship. 16-year-old Timothy Hudson is now facing horrifying allegations, charges so severe he could be locked away for life, but he remains free. He is not behind bars. Why? I'll show you the argument that he's making as his case is in court today, as prosecutors say he should be locked up. They say he is a danger to everyone around him. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. All right, hey guys, real quick, we have a lot to get to in this episode of On the Case, but before we start that, I want to tell you about this app. It's huge. It's called Upside, and it gets you cash back on everyday purchases like gas, groceries, and takeout. Here's what you do. It's super easy. You download Upside for free. You claim an offer at one of their 100,000 plus locations. Then you pay like you typically would with your card. Then you verify the purchase and you get money back. That's it. I've used it. Say I get gas or takeout. I search for offers on Upside. Then after I spend, money appears in my app. I just transfer it straight to my bank. Upside's frequent users earn an average of $254 back a year. So to start getting your cash back, click the link in the description or scan the QR code and use promo code OTC to get an extra 25 cents bonus on every gallon on your first tank of gas. 16-year-old Timothy Hudson was nowhere to be found today when his case was scheduled to be in court in Miami. This is video of 16-year-old Timothy Hudson entering Miami's federal courthouse in February. And at that time, we didn't know why he was going into court, but now we do because he has been indicted in the murder of his stepsister, Anna Kepner, and he is being tried as an adult. This is video per WTVJ television reporters surrounding the teenager as he made his way into court. Back then, he was charged as a juvenile, so the case was sealed, but that's not the case any longer. One reporter on that day did ask Hudson straight up, did you kill your stepsister? But he didn't say anything. His lawyer whisked him away. Now Hudson is being charged as an adult. So the question is, are the white gloves still on? Should they be taken off? In some ways, they have been taken off, but in others, there is criticism right now that this case is still being handled as if it was in juvenile court. I'll talk to a former prosecutor about what's happening here in just a moment. Now, instead of showing for court today for his arraignment on charges of first-degree murder and aggravated sexual assault, Timothy Hudson's lawyers filed this document waiving his appearance. And you can see there on line 3, his lawyers say that Timothy is entering a plea of not guilty in this case. Since Kepner's body was taken off of the Carnival cruise ship in Miami in November of last year, Timothy Hudson has been living with family members. Right now, he's in the care of his uncle, according to court documents. Prosecutors say that should change because he is now being tried as an adult, and we just got the argument that Hudson's side is making in hopes that he stays out of jail as this case moves forward. I'll get into that in just a moment, but to make sense of all of this that is happening now, we need to lay down how we got to this point. This is Anna Kepner. She was a high school senior from Titusville, Florida, about 3 hours north of Miami. She was set to graduate right about now. Her family said she had big plans after high school. She wanted to join the Navy. She had hoped of one day returning to her hometown as a member of law enforcement. In November, Anna Kepner joined her family on a cruise. Her grandparents spoke to ABC News. They said that this trip, it was supposed to be a celebration of a blended family coming together. You have Anna's dad, Christopher Kepner, who married a woman named Chantel Hudson, and she is the biological mom of the defendant, Timothy Hudson. Now, Christopher has made some strong words in the last week or so about his stepson and the accusations he is facing. We'll talk more about that here in just a moment. But as you go back to this cruise, the family was aboard this Carnival cruise ship called the Horizon. This cruise lasted roughly a week. It hit a couple spots in the Caribbean, then was going to return to Miami. Now, the night before this cruise came to an end, the grandparents said that Anna just wasn't feeling well, so she decided to go back to her stateroom early that night. But the next morning, she was nowhere to be found. Those grandparents said they heard an announcement about a medical emergency on the loudspeaker. 18-year-old Anna was found dead in her stateroom. She was allegedly stuffed under a bed. She had life jackets and a blanket covering her. This is video that was taken by Sheldon Fox, who's a reporter with WSVN TV in Miami. of Anna Kepner's body being taken off of the ship and being brought to the medical examiner's office. An autopsy would find that Anna Kepner died of what's called mechanical asphyxiation. Someone had allegedly put her in a chokehold, and that killed her. The only other person allegedly in the room with Anna that night, and there's allegedly surveillance video of this, it shows Timothy Hudson, the 16-year-old stepbrother, entering that room. It is being alleged that Anna's parents had Timothy Hudson, Anna Kepner, and Timothy's brother all stay in the same stateroom. Federal authorities were very quiet about this case for months, but we did learn information from a custody battle that has been playing out in civil court in Florida involving Anna's stepmom and her ex-husband, who is Timothy Hudson's biological dad. And in one of the hearings, Chantel made an admission that she allegedly did not give Timothy medication that he needs for insomnia and ADHD.
As far as does he have any diagnoses?
He has ADHD.
And how long has he been diagnosed with ADHD?
About 3 or 4 years.
Those after your separation from Mr. Hudson, correct?
About that timeline, yes.
And does he receive medication for his ADHD?
He does.
And what medication was he on for his ADHD?
Methylphenidate.
Would you pronounce that for me and spell it, Pam, if you know?
Methylphenidate, I don't know the spelling.
Okay.
The name brand's Concerta, if that
Okay,
helps.
thank you.
And how often would you take that medication?
Every morning.
And did he take the medication on the cruise with him?
Yes. He also takes a nighttime pill as well.
The same medication?
No, it's clonidine.
What is that for?
Insomnia.
Did you hold on to the medications?
Yes.
Did you make sure he took his medications every day?
He took his morning pill every day, and he missed 2 doses of his clonidine at night.
You held on to the clonidine as well?
Mm-hmm.
That's yes?
Yes, sorry.
And what do you mean he missed the doses? What happened there?
He went to bed before he got it. He was already asleep.
Including that Thursday night?
No, Thursday night he didn't get it. I had fell asleep before he did.
So just to make sure I understand, ma'am, while on the cruise, he missed taking that nighttime medication twice. One of the nights was because he fell asleep prior to taking the medication, and the other night was the night before.
Correct. I fell asleep before he
You
did.
fell asleep,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
he did not get the medication the night.
Yeah, he didn't come in
before
ask
the
for it.
incident.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
We don't know if any of that will factor into Timothy's defense. Anna's grandparents told ABC News that Timothy is claiming he doesn't remember anything that happened. They said, quote, in his own words, says he does not remember what happened. That is Anna Kepner's grandmother telling ABC News. The grandparents say that Anna Kepner and Timothy Hudson were, quote, 2 peas in a pod. But the family of Anna's ex-boyfriend said that she was allegedly afraid of Timothy in an interview with Inside Edition. They said that Anna would stay at other people's houses allegedly just to get away from Timothy. Now, the family dynamic, that could play a big role in how this case plays out, and it's a case that is going to play out in federal adult court. On March 10th, the federal government filed an indictment against Timothy Hudson. It was just unsealed, and it shows that the 16-year-old is facing charges of first-degree murder and a charge of aggravated sexual abuse. In the last several months, there was reporting that there were no signs of sexual assault on Kepner, but that allegedly was not true according to this indictment. The indictment alleges that Hudson, quote, did knowingly and unlawfully perpetrate and attempt to perpetrate a murder. That is the willful, deliberate, malicious, and premeditated killing of AK with malice aforethought, meaning he allegedly planned it. not just a split-second act. Count 2 is aggravated sexual abuse, and the indictment alleges that Hudson, quote, did knowingly cause AK to engage in a sexual act and did so by the use of force against AK. The decision on whether or not this case would continue on in juvenile court or move to adult court came down on April 10th when the judge ordered this case transferred to adult prosecution and unsealed the entire court record. And now we're learning just how much evidence the government has. According to a discovery filing that was unsealed, federal prosecutors have turned over to the defense autopsy photographs and x-rays, the full medical examiner's report with notes, an extraction of someone's cell phone believed to be Anna's dad, 4 body camera videos from Miami-Dade sheriff's deputies, and FBI timelines created by a special agent assigned to the case. Authorities have also allegedly used 3D crime scene reconstruction technology to show how Kepner's body was found in that cabin. For as serious as the charges are that Hudson is facing, why isn't he detained? When Hudson was charged as a juvenile, he was allowed to live with his uncle, according to court records, and that's where he is wearing a GPS monitor. But now that the case is in adult court, prosecutors are asking that Hudson be taken into custody. Prosecutors filed a motion saying that the rules that allowed Hudson to not be in custody should no longer apply, claiming, quote, the defendant is a danger to others and should be held in pretrial detention. They go on to say, quote, defendant engaged in the most serious, egregious, and violative crimes one person can inflict upon another. He committed these crimes against a victim with whom he had no apparent relational strife and whom he was being raised to view as a sibling. Furthermore, he carried out these crimes without any warning. He could commit such atrocious acts and despite an apparent supportive family environment. Finally, the defendant currently lives in a home where minor children reside. Consequently, there is no assurance any court could ever have that any conditions or combination of conditions would be sufficient to prevent the defendant from being a danger to others. Thus, the defendant should be detained. Now, in response, Hudson's defense asked for a hearing to be held in front of the same judge that allowed Hudson to not be in custody when he was facing murder charges in the juvenile system. The defense says, quote, as the past 2 months have unequivocally demonstrated, there is a combination of conditions that can be placed on TH's liberty to ensure that he is not a danger to the community. The defense also says that Hudson has followed all of the rules of his release order that were set more than 2 months ago. Now, Anna Kepner's dad, Christopher, the stepfather, in many ways, of Timothy Hudson, has not held back in comments that he has been making to the Daily Mail. Christopher says that Timothy is a danger to the public and, quote, I want to see him in an orange jumpsuit. He says that Hudson has allegedly not shown any sign of remorse or make an apology for what he allegedly did. Quote, we're upset that he's still out. We're 6 months in, and he should already have been arrested, and yet he's free to do whatever he wants right now, Christopher told the Daily Mail. He also told the Daily Mail that neither he or his wife, Timothy's mom, have spoken to Timothy since he was put in the care of his uncle, which was back in December. He reportedly says that Timothy does not remember what happened. Joining us now to talk more about this case, former federal prosecutor and the president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani. Thank you, as always, for being with us on Law and Crime. I'm going to start with it's a blunt question that I think a lot of people have. I mean, you see it in the headlines. Based on what Timothy Hudson's accused of, why is he to this point still out and not behind bars?
That's a good question. And typically, if someone is an adult and they are charged with murder, they're going to be detained with no bail. Now, obviously, in this case, Timothy Hudson is and was a juvenile. Now, he's being prosecuted as an adult, but that's not something that can automatically happen in federal court. A judge has to determine that it is in the interest of justice to do so, and the judge has made that determination. But typically, before that happens, juveniles are not detained because the juvenile justice system, its purpose is entirely different. It's for rehabilitation primarily, whereas, of course, in adult court, one of the primary things is to punish, but also to protect the community and to make sure individuals don't flee. And that's why adults who are charged with murder and aggravated sexual assault, they are almost always detained pending trial.
And prosecutors have filed a motion to have those conditions changed so he would be brought into custody because in kind of paraphrasing what prosecutors wrote, I mean, he is accused of just incredibly dangerous crimes, They accuse him of being very dangerous around people. They say that, the current situation he's in where he's allowed to live with his uncle, there's minor children in the home. And now that he's an adult, things have changed. The defense, they say that he's followed all the rules and conditions that have been put forward. He's on a GPS monitor. He's in, a home where they're looking after him. And they want to have a hearing. How does a hearing like that now work, now that he's being tried as an adult?
So these are bond hearings, and at those hearings, sometimes the defense will argue that an individual who is in custody should be released, or in this particular case, the prosecution is arguing that someone who's out on bond and under the supervision of pretrial services, that's how it works on the federal system, and there's always a series of conditions, right? Own no firearms, obey all laws, surrender your passport, the typical stuff. But what the prosecution is going to argue is that there's no condition or combination of conditions that will guarantee the defendant's appearance at trial and ensure that the public is safe during the pendency of the proceedings. So that is what the U.S. Attorney's Office there in Florida is going to argue. And of course, the defense is going to oppose it. But there's a special hearing just for this purpose.
I know the defense wants the hearing with the judge who allowed him to be in these conditions where he can live at his uncle's house. And of course, in the legal system, you have to follow all the rules and procedures along the way. But it doesn't feel like it's a surprise that he was charged as an adult in this case because he's 16. And then these are very serious charges that he's facing. I mean, how likely is it that a judge would say, okay, now that you're being tried as an adult, we're going to have you in detention as this case now moves forward?
It's very possible. And like you said, it really kind of depends on the jurisdiction. So for instance, in Florida state court, prosecutors don't need permission. They can file and charge a 16-year-old as an adult. But in this particular case, because it's the federal system and in certain states like California, typically you do need approval by the judge to charge juveniles as an adult. And it's really an amorphous standard, really the interest of justice. And similarly, when it comes to bail, judges have a lot of discretion. There are judges that will remand everyone charged with murder, period, or very serious sex crimes, rape, as we're talking about here, especially when you're talking about a murder that was committed. There's really no clear argument for self-defense or lack of intent, right, when you're talking about asphyxiation. There are others that will say, well, listen, this is someone who I agree should be charged as an adult, but is still a minor and was a minor when this happened. I do believe that these series of conditions can protect the public and ensure that he's going to appear in court. So it's a judge-specific decision. There's certainly not a one-size-fits-all, or I'm not going to paint it with very broad strokes, because really it's up to the determination of the individual judge in the case, and that's what we're seeing here.
And today he was slated to be arraigned. He was slated to be in court. His attorneys waive his appearance. They file this document that says he's seen the indictment, he has the indictment, he pleads not guilty, and he waives his appearance. What do you make of that decision as opposed to having him walk into court there in Miami?
Well, we know these arraignments, it's usually pro forma, right? The defendant almost always pleads not guilty, or the lawyer enters a not guilty plea on his or her behalf. So not a whole lot happens. It's an initial appearance, oftentimes a reading of the charges. Sometimes they'll even waive that, because really all an arraignment is to notify the defendant of the nature of the charges against him or her and a plea, and that's it. Usually it matters and lasts just a few minutes. Sometimes they'll address bail at that hearing, but oftentimes if it's going to be a longer hearing and the magistrate is taking many pleas, they're going to kick that bail hearing out for a number of days and set aside a specific time to address it. So since we're not addressing bail today, and it's just really an appearance that would take a few minutes, you'd have to wake him up very early, have the marshals bring him into court, be there for a few minutes, waiting around for hours. The lawyers probably said, you know what, this is a high-profile case. Let's just wait until that bond hearing, and we can have our client seen then.
What do you make about the decision, because he is 16 years old, and these are very serious charges he's facing, just about the decision in general to have this case tried in adult court as opposed to the juvenile system?
Well, that's the biggest decision in the case, probably bigger than really what the jury is going to find, because the potential exposure for him as an adult is life in prison on these charges. I mean, it's serious. Obviously, minors can't face the death penalty because of Supreme Court precedent. But, in the juvenile system, it's very possible that he would be released when he's an adult. Again, the purpose is very different. It's to rehabilitate, and cases in juvenile court, rarely do you see individuals get any incarceration. There's sort of talk about these camps in juvenile hall, but especially on the federal side, it is not that common. So the fact that you have Hudson being charged as an adult is probably the most important decision in the case, and it's going to really determine the course of his future.
You look at what's been reported, and Anna Kepner allegedly was, put in some sort of stranglehold by Timothy Hudson, and then her body is found under a bed in a stateroom, and she's covered in a blanket, she's covered in life jackets, and you have what appears to be Timothy Hudson's side of the story, according to family members, was that he doesn't remember what happened. But he is the one who is allegedly last seen going into the room along with Anna Kepner, and he's the only one who comes out. As this case goes forward, and I don't know what his defense is going to be, but if the defense is something along the lines of like he just doesn't remember and he blacked out and what happened, like how strong of a defense would that be?
That is a very difficult defense. If you're talking about legal insanity under the law, it is a very high threshold. I mean, you do see it in murder cases. We may see it in the Nick Reiner case, for instance, but if you're looking at defenses in murder cases, they typically fall into one of really four categories. First was, it wasn't me, someone else did it. Again, going to be tough, right? I assume there's, video evidence of the two going in and just, Hudson coming out. Obviously, there's likely DNA evidence if there is a sexual act, and there's the potential motive. Then you start looking at self-defense, right? That's another argument that we typically see. It's going to be very hard to argue in this case. You have a boy versus a girl, and it's possible but unlikely. Then you start seeing ways to potentially negate the intent. So you could say it was an accident, right? We might see that, for instance, in the David case with Celeste Rivas, saying that somehow she died of natural causes. Or you could say sort of heat of passion, manslaughter. Again, very difficult, doesn't necessarily fit the facts of this case. Again, especially when there's a sex act, especially when there's that strangulation, right? It's very hard to argue lack of intent. And then there's legal insanity. Legal insanity, Chris, requires the defendant really to be unable to know right from wrong because of a mental disease or defect. It's a very high threshold. Typically, the burden is on the defense, and jurors don't like those arguments. They succeed in a very small percentage of the time. So again, it's going to be a difficult case to defend on the merits. Now, I'm not saying at sentencing they don't have different arguments for mitigation because of his age, but to get a not guilty or even a hung jury at trial, I think the defense is going to have its hands full.
It's been roughly 6 months since Anna Kepner was allegedly murdered aboard this Carnival cruise ship. And, especially talking about like his potential mental state. I know his mom in like a civil situation involving her divorce and the custody of one of the children being Timothy Hudson. She talked about not allegedly giving him medication for ADHD and insomnia the night that all of this took place. But like how much of over the last several months have investigators likely been looking at his mental state or had an opportunity to have Timothy Hudson evaluated before here we go, the federal prosecutors deciding to hit him with some major charges?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal. So whether you're the prosecution or the defense, that's something that you have to look into, because at a minimum, it's going to be relevant at sentencing, but it may even be relevant during the jury trial phase of the case, depending on if it rises to that level of insanity or if it does negate the intent. Now, obviously, look, mental health is very real. People don't typically sexually assault their siblings or step siblings and murder them, right? And again, I go back to the Reiner case. I mean, there's some similar things being floated out in the media in that case. So if someone's not on his meds, again, not necessarily a legal defense, doesn't make you not guilty for the crime unless you truly don't know what you're doing. But again, it can be something that is raised as a factor at sentencing that just shows that, listen, this was not an intentional act. Here's someone who doesn't remember. Here's someone who wasn't on his meds. Here's someone who's a minor. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with all of this, but you can really predict the way the defense is going to go here to argue, look, this is someone who deserves a shot, not in the near future, but maybe after serving decades in federal prison, at some point in his adult life, he should have the opportunity to rejoin the general population if he can get these mental health issues under control.
And when it comes to, and we have a long way to go, he has pleaded not guilty. These are all allegations at this point. He very well may have a strong defense that we don't know about that can explain a lot of this away. But with that said, like, he is 16 years old. He's facing charges that could put him away for the rest of his life. I mean, if he is found guilty and he receives a sentence like that, how does the federal system handle someone who's 16 but would be going into a situation at a federal prison that would be incredibly dangerous, I'm sure?
Yeah, Chris, that's a great question. So someone like him would have to be isolated from the adult population. So when you have a high-profile defendant or a juvenile defendant, again, our Bureau of Prisons, it's not set up for people to be incarcerated who are minors. There are not a lot of these cases, a lot of these individuals in federal prison. So you have to protect him from other inmates who are adults, who are potentially dangerous. That's one of the jobs of the BOP. So obviously they segregate people based on sex, but they also segregate based on risk to the inmate and also the risk that the inmate poses to other people in the general population. And here's someone that can't be in the general population because of his age.
Yeah, and a long way to go until we get to that point. But certainly a step forward here. He's pleaded not guilty. We'll see what happens next. Nima Rahmani, former federal prosecutor, president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Of course, Chris. Thanks for having me as always. I'm sure we're going to be following this for quite some time.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and you can also find us streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.